SportsGrid.com. Betting insights and entertainment at your fingertips 24/7 as our team covers the most important topics in sports wagering. Real-time odds, predictive betting models, expert picks, and more. Want the edge? Then get on the grid. SportsGrid.com.
Great.
Preseason week 2 is here. This is Fantasy Sports Today on Sports Grid. We're ready to get into it, help you win in fantasy football this season. Craig Nish, Davis Maddock back at it here, of course, on this Thursday. And, certainly, Davis, getting excited here. My drafts, I'm getting the emails. You know how it works from the commissioners in the home leagues. Like, I'm getting the emails. What day works? Oh, it just doesn't work. What about this? Do we change the rules? I guess we're sort of late to the game in doing this a little bit, but that's where we're at here today. What's going on?
Yeah, that is where you're at. I am in the same place, of course. Actually have my big home league draft this weekend. I'm going back to Kansas City to go and do it with all my buddies from high school and college. Definitely trying to schedule some other ones, though. We have an auction draft that we are trying to set up with some of our industry contemporaries. And, if you think that it's hard to set up a date for your home league 90-minute snake draft, you try and set a date for a 4 or 5 hour auction draft with a bunch of people spread all across the United States. It's quite the ordeal getting it set.
Yeah, definitely so. It's interesting. Joe Pisapia, who's going to join us a little bit later in the show, he has an auction draft coming up. It's the one that I used to do, Davis. And he was saying, hey, you should get back in it this year and do it. And I said immediately yes. And then I remembered, wait a second, this is the same one that I did a couple of years ago where it was an auction and it lasted like 6 hours online. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to have to pass on that this year. But interesting as this weekend is coming. Good luck to everyone who's drafting this weekend. Let's get to our headlines here on this Thursday, August 19th, 2021. Freddie Freeman hits for the cycle and credited his wife's cappuccino for that. Freddie Freeman did that here in Miami last night. How about Lance Lynn and Caleb Smith both ejected after foreign substance checks? Lance Lynn for basically tossing his belt. Caleb Smith, who we're going to hear from a little bit later in the show, was as strongly against doing anything in terms of cheating that I've ever seen anybody say. Went on a tirade after the game yesterday. So we'll see what happens there with Caleb Smith. No doubt about that. Plenty of other headlines here on the show today. We got plenty more to get to here on the program as the Mets come back in the ninth and they win in extra innings and they reward Steve Cohen for his tweet. Congratulations there. Shohei Ohtani hits his 40th. He's the MVP. He's awesome. What more can we say? And Olivia Multe scores in her first professional goal. Really cool there in soccer as well. But we had moved away, Davis, from the sticky stuff. We really haven't talked about it a lot since back in May. Everyone said this was going to ruin the baseball season, and it didn't, shockingly. We really had nothing to say about that. But Lance Lynn tossed out of the game yesterday, asked after the game yesterday what happened between him and the umpire.
I was coming off the mound. He was late getting over, so I left my glove and my hat. And then while I was going down the dugout trying to see the trainers because I'm dealing with something, he yells at me that he needs to see my belt. So I tossed it up, and then he throws me out.
Were you expected to get tossed at that point?
No, I mean, he's late getting over there, and then I'm trying to get some work done to go back out for the fifth. And, obviously I hurt his feelings.
All right, Davis. So there you have it. Lance Lynn takes his belt off, tosses it up at the umpire. Umpire throws him out of the game. And, there probably will be some sort of suspension coming for Lance Lynn, which will be appealed, and then it'll be nothing. But it's kind of what happened yesterday with, by the way, the pitcher who may win the American League Cy Young this year.
Yeah, I just thought that it was really interesting because I don't remember the last time that we talked about sticky stuff on this show. Now, granted, we have been really turning our attention towards fantasy football and really getting in to the nitty gritty there, but this was a huge storyline in baseball. You really couldn't turn on any sports related content, any baseball related content without hearing about the sticky stuff or the lack of sticky stuff, right? We were talking about, Garrett Cole, he's getting blown up because he needs the sticky stuff. Garrett Richards can't pitch without the sticky stuff. How is this going to impact the standings? How is this going to impact fantasy? How is this going to impact DFS? And then pretty much the story just went away. Honestly, probably one of the first times you'd ever hear Major League Baseball say, thank goodness for NFL training camp. Thank goodness for someone to take the attention off of this. And, my guy Ohtani hits his 40th home run. So I saw lots more baseball tweets on the timeline last night. Fewer people talking about what's going on at Denver Broncos practice, a little bit more people talking about what's going on in baseball. I got a question for you here to wrap out our first segment, Craig. Shohei Ohtani wakes up this morning, feels a crick in his neck, and the doctors say, you know what, buddy, let's shut it down. Let's just, you've had a great season, 40 home runs, 18 starts. Does he still win MVP if he doesn't play another inning?
Oh, yeah. He won the MVP weeks ago. Yeah, absolutely. This is not even close. He doesn't have to make another pitch. He doesn't have to swing a bat the rest of the season. What he's done this year is comparable in a season. It's comparable to an all-time great player. I mean, I don't know what other way to put it. And his odds on FanDuel will also tell you that too. But yes, he is the MVP. National League, I still think is up in the air a little bit. Although, I mean, Tatis is creeping toward minus 300 here as well. But yes, your Ohtani bet is safe going into the month of September. All right, coming up, more fantasy football discussion. We're going to dive into so many different topics here on the show today, so many different players. Great way to preview the upcoming season is today here on FST. So stay on the grid. We'll be right back. Great.
SportsGrid.com. Betting insights and entertainment at your fingertips 24/7 as our team covers the most important topics in sports wagering. Real-time odds, predictive betting models, expert picks, and more. Want the edge? Then get on the grid. SportsGrid.com.
Great. Couple of weeks until we got to get real serious about the NFL season in terms of predicting where things are going to end up. But a really good early look, I think, on FanDuel at some potential teams, Davis, on the fringe of making the playoffs. And we're going to go through a few of these here today. Davis, I don't know about you, but this is one of those things where the approach is very curious always, because tonight, tomorrow, and Saturday, we're probably going to have something significant happen, whether it's positive or negative, that could change our opinions on these. But nonetheless, going through some teams to make the playoffs is what we're going to do here on the show today.
Yeah, I am always very excited by these markets because, it's a little bit less related to other things that go on in the league, right? So when we talk about, winning divisions and things like that, I think that if you just want to bet, I think this team is better than the market. I honestly like these to make the playoff markets a little bit better than to win the division. And also, the win over-unders, because as we've talked about, and we talked about these with the passing yardage props, sometimes that week 18 game used to be week 17, now week 18, that could be the dagger for your bet. And you'd really like the starters to be there.
All right, so let's get started here. And a lot of these odds are pretty, I wouldn't say 50-50. There's juice heavy on a couple of the sides, but I think it shows you there's a chance of two different outcomes here, which I like to get into. We'll start with Seattle, the Seahawks. New odds over on FanDuel to make the playoffs. We have the yes at minus 130, the no at plus 108. And a lot of different ways you can go with this here for sure, Davis. Look, this is the toughest division in all likelihood in the NFL and the NFC West. I think most would agree the Rams will be good. 49ers will probably be very good. Maybe both teams will be very good. And where does that leave Seattle going into the season?
So I think it leaves Seattle in a pretty precarious position personally, because I think that the reason why they are so favored here has a lot to do with the assumption that they are going to be better than the San Francisco 49ers, and also the assumption that there's basically no chance that the Arizona Cardinals make the playoffs. And I don't know if I can get there, Craig. I feel like the Cardinals are pretty strong. Kyler Murray hurt his shoulder last year. He didn't miss any games, but there was a huge change in how he was playing after he hurt his shoulder. I think there is a legitimate argument with Matt Stafford, with Trey Lance, with Russell Wilson in this division that Kyler Murray might have the best season in him because he's such an amazing runner. He's so hyper accurate. He can make all the throws off his front foot, off his back foot, rolling to his left, rolling to his right. I actually think the better bet here is the Seahawks to not make the playoffs, because then that could mean the 49ers are better than them. That could mean, they lose 2 of those games to the Cardinals that they would really need to win, and that Matt Stafford acclimates really well in Los Angeles. I mean, this division, you're right, it is so tough. And given that I don't feel that strongly that Pete Carroll is a really good coach. He's got Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett, and he still wants to run the air out of the ball. I think I would rather bet no here than yes for the Seahawks making the playoffs.
Yeah, well, when Seattle had that great defense and the NFL was a running team, Pete Carroll probably was among the best coaches in the NFL. But you're right. Now that the league has changed, it seemingly is not really adjusted to that. Okay, now let's go to my favorite one here. Easiest one for me. New Orleans Saints to make the playoffs. The yes is plus 110. The no is minus 134. As we're creeping toward the start of the NFL season, I'm probably going to go all in on the Saints fade. I'm not a huge fan of anything that's going on right now outside of the head coach there. New quarterback, S, plural, wide receivers I've never heard of. A generational running back for sure, but one injury away from then that offense crumbling. Minus 134 on the no. I don't love laying big juice here, but I'm going to be against the Saints this year. I've pretty much decided that.
So I am not as anti-New Orleans Saints as you, particularly for fantasy. I still really like Alvin Kamara. I think this could be the most touches that Alvin Kamara ever gets in his career. I am definitely more pro Jameis than you. I think that they could win 8-9 games with Jameis at their quarterback, no problem. But I don't think there's any way that an NFC South team makes the wild card, because I think 11 games is probably the minimum to make that either the first wild card or the second wild card in the NFC. There are just too many good teams in the NFC, and I don't think they're beating out the Buccaneers, right? I think the Buccaneers are almost certainly a better team. And because I think the NFC West is so strong, the NFC West could have 3 playoff teams. Now the permutations would get weird there, because that would mean that all the teams would basically have to go 1-1 in the division to get there. Because if you start taking, if you lose 6 of your games in the division, well, it's going to be real tough, if you're the San Francisco 49ers to make it. But I do not think the Saints are going to make the playoffs. I think this has the real makings of kind of a dumpster fire style season for them as they try to move past the Drew Brees era. So I would prefer to bet the no on the Saints making the playoffs.
Yep, as would I, for sure. Okay, now here is a really tough one, I think, and the odds would indicate that as well. I've gone back and forth on this one, and honestly, I'm just really not sure. Minnesota Vikings to make the playoffs. Always well coached, always seemingly on the verge of being great, but not quite that, but usually enough to get in. And it is a 50-50 proposition essentially here. The yes is minus 106. The no is minus 116. I think that of all the bets this weekend in the preseason, if you asked me to take one team, it would be the Vikings this week. I think that they have to come out and play better than they did last week. They were the only team blown out in the preseason last week. I think that they're going to play well. That's no indication of the regular season, but that's just the way I feel about that. Davis, what do you think here? Vikings make the playoffs this year.
You know, this is where I falter. I think the Bears are going to be so much better than other people think, right? I think when we did our over-under show that we did a little bit earlier in the offseason, if I recall correctly, their win total was 7.5, and I made the over there my best bet of the season. Now, this is not a positive indictment of Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace. You know, I'm not saying these guys are galaxy brain geniuses, and I do think, despite everything Justin Fields has done, I do think, you know, that first snap against the Rams, I do think we are going to see Andy Dalton, but I don't imagine that lasting that long. But I think that the Bears, their defense is better than the Vikings for sure, but the Vikings offense, you know, projects better. Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, Dalvin Cook, Kirk Cousins. But what if Fields just has this Mahomesian impact on the Bears where it's that rising tide lifts all boats thing? I definitely think that we could see that. So I am actually going to go on the Vikings missing the playoffs. And another thing, 0 vaccinated quarterbacks. It's going to be the Kendall Hinton game, I'm telling you, for the Minnesota Vikings at least once.
Yeah, if it is, they will not make it. Okay, finally, the Dallas Cowboys with Dak Prescott are the favorite to win the division. We'll see what he looks like in the preseason, if at all. They're minus 156. The no is plus 128. Davis admittedly is a big Cowboys fan, but I'm going to ask you to put on your impartial hat. And do you think the Cowboys make the playoffs? I don't see two teams in the East making it, so this would mean that you think Dallas wins the division and getting in.
Look, they're better than New York, and they're better than Philadelphia. It's inarguable, absolutely inarguable. The question would be, can Ryan Fitzpatrick string together a 10-win season for the second time in his 15-year career? I'm saying no. I'm saying no, he cannot. I'm saying the Cowboys win a bunch of games, 38-35. Dak wins the MVP. CeeDee Lamb has 1,700 receiving yards, and they just win the division that way. So I'm saying yes, my Dallas Cowboys do make the playoffs as the 5 seed in the NFC.
Yeah. Is Dak playing this week? Maybe I just missed that. Is he in or out this week? Any clue?
Not going to play. I don't think we'll see him at all in the preseason, but he has resumed some light throwing at training camp for the Dallas Cowboys.
Okay. All right. There you have it. Coming up next, more strategy for fantasy football. We are all in on this discussion, and we're going to find out when you take a specific quarterback in your fantasy football draft. So stay on the grid. More of Davis and I here on this Thursday. Don't go away.
Your heart's racing.
SportsGrid.com. Betting insights and entertainment at your fingertips 24/7 as our team covers the most important topics in sports wagering. Real-time odds, predictive betting models, expert picks, and more. Want the edge? Then get on the grid. SportsGrid.com.
Great.
Sunday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern, myself, Matt Stryker, Joe Pisapia, we host Fantasy Sports Today as we get you ready for the upcoming fantasy football season. Joe will be with us coming up in less than an hour as we'll review what's happened thus far in the fantasy football campaign, kind of go over some of the games this weekend, including a preview tonight of Philadelphia and New England. And Davis, this weekend and next are, arguably the two biggest weekends people will be drafting their fantasy football teams, especially next weekend, I think. But I love strategy sessions. Essentially, that's what we're going to be doing here on the show today. And we're going to be asking questions. When do you take the best quarterback? When do you take the best running back? When do you take the best defense? So I like the way this is set up. So let's get right into it without further ado. When do you take the best quarterback in fantasy, who is Patrick Mahomes? His ADP is the third round. He's ranked number 2, ironically, in terms of fantasy. I guess Josh Allen is ranked number 1, I'm guessing, going into the season. 2020 last year, 4.740 passing yards, missed some time, of course, 308 rushing yards, 40 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. And Davis, look, this is a guy that's probably going to go down as the best ever if he can catch Brady in terms of the Super Bowls. That may be hard to do, actually, but a lot of other things relying on that. But as far as an individual quarterback, he's got a chance to do that. But in 2021, you are paying a premium for him drafting a QB in the 3rd round, if you do, according to the ADP. And that is the question that we have for you today. When do you take Patrick Mahomes?
So I never take Patrick Mahomes in the 3rd round of drafts, which is where his average draft position. He kind of goes about that tail end of the 3rd round, kind of that 310, 311. And I don't take him there because, I can't really justify taking Mahomes over the great wide receivers there, Robert Woods, Amari Cooper, things like that, Allen Robinson. You got to get those guys because they are so important. Where I do like to take Patrick Mahomes is when I have started out my draft from, the 6th pick, 7th pick, 8th pick, and I take Travis Kelce or I take Tyreek Hill. Then I take my Jonathan Taylor or Antonio Gibson in the 2nd round. Then I take my stud wide receiver, Allen Robinson, Amari Cooper, Terry McLaurin in the 3rd round. And then you're sitting there on the clock in the 4th round. Mahomes has dropped a couple spots after ADP. This happens with quarterbacks all the time if the room just kind of goes that way. And then you say, all right, I got Tyreek Hill. I'm going to take Patrick Mahomes. I have Travis Kelce. I'm going to take Patrick Mahomes. And every time my opponent opens up his head-to-head screen on Sunday morning, he goes, oh, crap. Better hope the Chiefs have a bad game because if Patrick Mahomes has a good game, it definitely means Tyreek is having a good game. It definitely means Travis Kelce is having a good game. And I don't love from a pure projection standpoint, I don't have Mahomes that far ahead of Josh Allen, that far ahead of Kyler Murray, that far ahead of Dak Prescott. But there's just something demoralizing about going up against Patrick Mahomes in a fantasy game. There just really is. We've all been there where we're like, all right, we're heading. Remember, I think it was against the Dolphins. Okay, we're going into Monday night. I'm up against Patrick Mahomes, and he throws for 450 yards and 5 touchdowns and rushes for another one because that's what he does. He is the best player in the league, and he is going to have some of those absurd performances that no one else is capable of in the NFL right now.
Yeah, well said. Same thing can be said, by the way, for the next point of discussion, which is Derrick Henry, a very scary player to go up against in fantasy. He's being taken most likely in the top 5 of every fantasy football draft. There are some that take him 2, 1, 3. I've seen 4. Last year was the 2nd-ranked fantasy football running back. He rushed for over 2,000 yards last season. We know he does not catch the ball, only 19. He scored 17 touchdowns. So, this is such an interesting one too, Davis, because we're going to hit a year where Derrick Henry is going to turn into like Larry Johnson. It's just going to end. Like Maurice Jones-Drew. It's just going to end for Derrick Henry. I don't know when it's going to be. Maybe it goes on for another 5 years. But there are some that think that, gosh, it's just too many carries, too much too reliant on Derrick Henry. They got to scale it back eventually. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, Derrick Henry could end up being a Hall of Famer, Davis, and play 3 more years of 1,800 yards, and he's in. I mean, that's it. I mean, Terrell Davis is in the Hall of Fame with doing less than that. So where do you take Derrick Henry this year? 1, 2, 3, 4?
I think Derrick Henry could pretty easily be a Hall of Famer. Let's say the Titans, somehow beat the Chiefs in a crazy dramatic playoff game the next couple years. He gets, he gets through his 2nd contract and we have 8 years of really good production from him. Pretty possible that Derrick Henry has a Hall of Fame career and I would have had him on my fantasy teams 0 times. A big fat bagel, because the answer to the question of when do you take Derrick Henry is someone in my drafts are always someone is always going to like him more than me. I take, when I'm on the clock at 3 in a fantasy football draft, I take Ezekiel Elliott. When I'm on the clock at 4 and Ezekiel Elliott is gone, I take Alvin Kamara. When I'm on the clock at 5, I'm probably taking Kamara if someone else has taken Derrick Henry. Then you start to get to 6, 7, 8. Well, someone has already taken Henry there. I mean, if I'm on the clock at the 10th pick in the 1st round and Derrick Henry's there, I could probably, suck it up and take him. But I would guess I've done 300 drafts this offseason, And that has never been an option presented to me. If it is, whatever, I'll suck it up and I'll do it. But I mean, this is the stat I like to give people. Derrick Henry had 2,100 yards last year, including a 2,000-yard rushing season, 17 rushing touchdowns, and he didn't crack 20 fantasy points per game in PPR settings. I mean, he did everything he could possibly do, and he still really was not the game-breaking guy like Christian McCaffrey was. So I just can't do it.
Do you play in any non-PPR leagues? Any?
I play in some half PPR, but no, I do not. To my knowledge, in terms of how the settings work, I don't think I play in one where it's a true standard league. Now, in that format, I think you could take him. I actually would have him.
That's my point.
I think, I think he'd be a big boost in that format where there are no points at all awarded for receptions.
Okay, yeah, I guess that's my point, is that, there are some people that play in antiquated leagues like that where there is no PPR, and a half, changes the equation a little bit. But for none, I mean, I think he's the number one pick overall in fantasy. Okay, the Rams defense is boy, are they really going to get Andy Dalton in week one? I think I have to bump this ADP up a little bit. They were the number one defense in the NFL last season, 53 sacks. If you don't know why, you don't follow the NFL. Aaron Donald is the best defensive player in the last decade. He's going straight to Canton, Ohio. He's a Hall of Famer, doesn't have to play another down. 14 interceptions, 1 safety, and 4 touchdowns. Davis, the Rams, I mean, I think Aaron Donald may be one of the best defensive players ever, like in the history of the NFL. Like that is what we're watching right now. Like Lawrence Taylor on the line, I think. I mean, I don't know. I mean, he is as dominant a player as there is, but there are some people in fantasy don't like taking defenses early, don't understand if you do field the defense/special teams when you should take that. So ADP is about the 14th, 15th round. When are you taking the Rams this year?
So I probably won't ever take the Rams because, I mean, Craig, like, I'm a nerd, dude. Like, I log on here and I have real opinions about, like, Donovan Peoples-Jones and KJ Hamler. Like, I'm a nerd. I get excited to make my 15th round draft picks, my 16th round draft picks. But I actually am a pretty big advocate, especially in high stakes managed leagues. Like when I go do my FFPC drafts and my NFC drafts, I will actually try to get a defense, not necessarily a good defense like the Rams, but a defense that has a good opening schedule. And, it's obviously It's hard for the Rams to have a bad opening schedule. And this is actually a leak on my part, but I don't even have a good defense yet to give you guys that has like a really, there's always a defense that opens the season with like 3 great defensive matchups, right? I don't have that defense yet. I promise as we get closer to the season, I will have one for you guys. Another thing I like to do, I love to take the elite kicker. So my answer for the Rams defense is, 14th, 15th round, no problem with it. But I love in these high stakes managed leagues, and honestly in my, my 12 team PPR league with my buddies from college, when we go draft this Saturday, I will have Harrison Butker and Justin Tucker and Greg Zuerlein in my queue, like fairly early, right? Like before my other league mates would like really be considering those, because I think there is not only a huge advantage in taking, having the elite kicker, but like the next level of that is I'm not spending any of my fab dollars. In these high stakes managed leagues, every fab dollar kind of matters. Like I'm going to need to do a lot of $5, $10 transactions out of 1,000. And if I can go the whole year and only spend $1 on a kicker when I need to replace Harrison Butker during his bye week, that's I think a pretty big structural advantage. So I actually love to get an elite kicker.
Going back to defense special teams real quick for a minute, is there a Devin Hester, Dante Hall player in the NFL that does make a difference at all on the special team side? Is there any?
You know who the best kick returner is in the NFL? It's Cordarrelle Patterson, who is on the Atlanta Falcons. Now, he doesn't return punts, but Cordarrelle Patterson leads the NFL history, not like active players, NFL history in kick return, in yards per kick return. The one thing you've seen is teams don't play their elite guys at punt returner anymore. The days of like Antonio Brown or Julian Edelman going back for punt returns, those are pretty much done. So like off the top of my head, I actually can't think of a return man for punts that is that elite. But I do know Cordarrelle Patterson for the Falcons. He is the best kick returner in football right now.
Yeah, I think Waddle on Miami is returning punts this year. I don't know that for a fact, but I think he has been returning punts in their practices. So maybe that's a factor, going into the season. We'll see. All right. Well, our conversation shifts from where do you take the player to handcuff running backs in fantasy. There are a lot of people that have varying opinions on how you attack handcuffs in fantasy, and Davis and I will discuss that next.
Great.
SportsGrid.com. Betting insights and entertainment at your fingertips 24/7 as our team covers the most important topics in sports wagering. Real-time odds, predictive betting models, expert picks, and more. Want the edge? Then get on the grid. SportsGrid.com.
Great.
Crucial conversation we're going to have here in fantasy football about handcuffing players. And the reason why is because it's very simple. Players get hurt in professional sports. And sometimes it's good to have insurance, which is basically essentially what a handcuff is in fantasy. As an example, like scary moment today, Mark Andrews collapses on the field with the Baltimore Ravens. The good news is it's just cramps, so it looks like he's totally okay. But Davis, I would say this, and I talked to Joe. I'll talk to Joe Pisapia about this a little bit later on. As we sit here on the 19th of August, and I'm not a doom and gloom type person. I think that most people know me by now on that one. We have really not had a significant injury in the preseason, which is super rare. Like usually at this point, Davis, something has left us shell-shocked in terms of an injury that has shaken something up, wide receiver, quarterback, running back. I don't know the answer. So handcuffing, especially at running back, is so crucial right now because you could get some of these players, if you choose to go this route, at a pretty huge discount before something like this happens, because it's inevitable. Either it's going to happen in the next 2 weeks or it's going to happen during the regular season.
Yeah, now to be fair, we have had one big injury. We had Cam Akers, who was going as, a first-round pick when draft started. He tore his Achilles in the offseason, and we've seen Darrell Henderson push up the boards. And to our handcuffing strategy, people who had taken Darrell Henderson, well, look, they got a huge advantage from that. So to define the handcuffing strategy a little bit for people who maybe are not super familiar, a handcuff is just colloquial slang for a backup running back to the starter. And, as football has gone even more towards running back by committee, true handcuffs are more rare than ever. We have some teams with like 3 running backs that we're drafting, or 4 running backs even that we're drafting. Some of the examples, would be, there's no question in doubt, Tony Pollard is Ezekiel Elliott's handcuff. If Zeke were to miss a game for any reason, Tony Pollard would be lined up, minimum of 18 touches, 15 carries, 3 targets. And also, there's a difference between handcuffs and just running backs who are, a little bit cheaper, but still have a role. So handcuff running backs tend to be, they have very little standalone value, but a lot of contingent value. So for me, kind of the poster boy of this would be Alexander Mattison this season. Mike Boone is gone. Mm-hmm. He's on the Denver Broncos roster. They have Amir Abdullah and Kene Nwangu, who are mostly special teams players, kick returners, guys like that. James White is not really a handcuff, right? So he would be the other example. James White he's going to be in his role. Damian Harris would get hurt, and they put in Sony Michel or Ramondre Stevenson. James White's role wouldn't really change.
Mm-hmm. And what is handcuffing? As Davis mentioned, running back that handcuffs the starter. Tony Pollard is Ezekiel Elliott's handcuff this season, and maybe even a little more than that. Somebody texted me just before the show Can you give me the best handcuff in fantasy? My goodness, I hit it. Thank goodness. I told him Pollard. Okay, I feel a lot better about that. And, obviously it's only contingent upon injury or suspension, more or less, but some could emerge and become better. I don't think anybody thought going into the season that Kareem Hunt last year would have been a lot more than a handcuff, and he really was for Kansas City. So in terms of values, we're pretty clear on Pollard. I'm the same with you. I think Pollard maybe even has somewhat of a role going into the year. Who do you think has the best handcuff values, Dave, for the upcoming season?
Well, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. When your buddy texted you for advice and you said Tony Pollard, you were absolutely correct. I was actually just looking, again, I'm a nerd. I have a spreadsheet of all of the teams that I've drafted, right? So I know, okay, I've taken this player this percentage of the time. I've taken this player this many times. And Tony Pollard is the running back that I have drafted the third most often in my fantasy leagues this year. Because one, I actually think what you just said about Pollard is true. I think he's got a little bit of standalone value. I don't think they're going to give him like 10 touches a game or anything like that, but I think they'll throw him a couple passes. Also, Tony Pollard's first career 100-yard game actually did not come in a game where Ezekiel Elliott was injured. It was against Craig's Miami Dolphins. They were up, I think, 28-3 at half or something like that. Pollard came in the second half. They were resting the starters, and Zeke had a 100-yard game, and Pollard had a 100-yard game. There probably won't be a ton of occurrences like that this season, but I'd say, maybe 2 or 3 where the Cowboys have put up enough points where Pollard is coming in the second half, or maybe even the reverse where they're losing, 30-14 or whatever, and they say, all right, it's Ben DiNucci and Tony Pollard time. So Pollard is definitely the best. Madison, I guess, is he might even be a more interesting case, because Madison used to go where Tony Pollard went. He used to be a 10th, 11th, 12th round pick, and Dalvin Cook was so good last season. And in actually the game where Dalvin Cook missed with injury, the Vikings got blown out in that game. So Amir Abdullah was playing instead of Alexander Madison. But I kind of think that's an example of more noise than signal. I would anticipate if something happened to Dalvin Cook this year, they would be treating Alexander Madison basically like Dalvin Cook. I think that he would. I think he's being a little bit undervalued by the market right now. Another guy I really like, Damian Williams on the Chicago Bears. It's looking like Tariq Cohen is going to start the season on the physically unable to perform list. He's not even returned to training camp. Like, he hasn't been active here with Justin Fields or anything like that. I said this on the show yesterday to George, but the last time we saw Damian Williams, he was running into the end zone untouched in his custom, Nike Dunk cleats that he had. Very, very big. I love Damian Williams, and I will never forgive the voters for. I had a 25-1 ticket on Damian Williams to win Super Bowl MVP, and I'll never forgive the voters for not giving that to him. But I think Damian is actually an example of a guy who's got a little bit of standalone value. Maybe they give him 4 or 5 touches a game. But if we saw what happened when Tariq Cohen was injured last year, David Montgomery was the running back 4 in fantasy last year. If Montgomery were to be injured, I think they would give the ball to Damian a ton. And I had a question for you on this, or just wanted your opinion. But Chuba Hubbard, the Oklahoma State guy, 4th round pick out of Oklahoma State for the Panthers.
Yes.
We saw what Mike Davis did last year. I mean, why is he going 193rd overall? Shouldn't Hubbard be going next to Alexander Madison?
I'm glad you asked, because I need to ask you something. I thought Chuba Hubbard was the best running back I saw in college football. Okay, period. So, and I watch a lot. I don't understand what happened. What happened? Did he have a bad combine or something? Or do they think he's too small? Because, Davis, he was unstoppable in college. I don't recall 2020 as much as I do 2019. And I remember hearing, Chuba Hubbard, Doak, possible winner, 2nd round pick in the NFL. And then it just didn't happen. So what did I miss with him? Because I'm totally in agreement with you. He was a star in college, but what happened? Combine, frame? What was the deal?
Well, what happened to him is that he should have went into the NFL draft in 2019. He should not have come back to school. He got injured in 2020. and also was just not very effective. The first 2 years of his career, he averaged 6 yards per carry. His final year at Oklahoma State, he averaged 4.7, only caught 8 passes. But I mean, in 2019, he had 351 touches, 2,300 yards, and 21 touchdowns. Like, you know, he was a star. So I'm with you. I actually think I'm willing to pretty much write off what happened last season. And Oklahoma State, like, their backup quarterback was in and their offensive line. Like, so I'm willing to kind of write off what happened last year. I think he's really good. And I think if something were to happen to Christian McCaffrey, they would just slot him in the same way they did with Mike Davis. So I think he is really underdrafted here.
Yeah, I do too. And look, this is no injury factor with McCaffrey or anything else. I just thought that this player was good from me watching those Big 12 games where everyone was throwing 2 years ago, and Oklahoma State didn't even need to. They would just hand the ball off to him, and this guy's running like fit. And he was like, and by the way, he was a guy too that when teams would, because a lot of times when after you run 10, 15 yards, the running backs slow down, they're done. Like, this guy was getting faster, and they could not catch him, the defensive back. So I don't know. I just didn't get it. Like, I didn't understand it. So I'm with you there. You have, let's close it out. You have Darrington Evans. Of course, something would have to happen to Derrick Henry here. And then Samaje Perine, who I feel like, I don't know that this is a weird player, because it's like I feel like he's done just enough to be a handcuff and stick around in the NFL, but I never feel like he's gotten a true opportunity, and I don't know that he will this year either.
Yeah, I guess I don't feel that confident about Perine, though he did get a couple opportunities last year where he looked really good. And I mean, he has bounced around in the NFL. He was on the Washington football team. He was on the Dolphins, and then the Dolphins actually cut him, and then he signed with the Bengals back in 2019. And then with Joe Mixon injured last year, well, then Giovanni Bernard got injured, so the Bengals were down to the very end of their roster, and Perine actually had a couple decent games. Week 15 against Houston, 13 carries, 95 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 receptions, 41 yards. Now, they did bring in some undrafted guys. They let Giovanni Bernard go, but they drafted Chris Evans, and they signed Puka Williams. Puka Williams was actually a really good running back at KU, and caught a bunch of passes and was really dynamic, but he only weighs about 170 pounds. So I'm not I actually think Perine might kind of even be like Hubbard. Well, I don't think he's as good as Hubbard. Hubbard, I think, is really good, but Perine is a guy I feel like I think he's pretty solidly the handcuff in Cincinnati. I don't think they would be ready to turn things over to rookies yet. That's kind of how we see things happen with running backs in the NFL, is if you stick around for 4 or 5 years, you kind of become like CJ Anderson, where like just by the fact that you've stuck around that long, the coaches just kind of trust you. Or Malcolm Brown. Malcolm Brown, great example. No one ever loved using Malcolm Brown in fantasy when he was on the Rams, but they kept giving him third down touches. They kept giving him goal line touches. Remember in 2019, the Rams come out and they were trying to determine how healthy Todd Gurley was, and Malcolm Brown scored 2 goal line touchdowns. Like that's kind of what I see happening for Perine, where if Mixon were to get banged up, he wouldn't look that good, wouldn't be blowing anyone away with his athleticism, but he'd kind of just be grinding out the fantasy points.
I think the interesting part of the season, going back to Hubbard a little bit, and even going into like some predictions as far as college football in 2021, is going to be that we're going to be wrong a lot on players that did not play well last year that are stars right now because of everything that happened. In doing a lot of research, and I've been doing some streams and stuff for Fantasy Alarm and Wager Alarm, like these teams, Davis, people don't realize these teams played 4 games all year. Other teams, they had 30 guys at a time out with COVID. Like, it was an insane year. I think we found the best through the combine and those workouts and all the guys who were drafted. But I think there's some other Hubbards out there, man, that we didn't get to see a lot last year, that are going to be great in college this year, and maybe even some others in the NFL too. So I'm definitely on board with that for sure. All right, we're going to come back and wrap up this first hour of our 2-hour program here on Fantasy Sports Today. When we come back, we'll tell you all about how you can follow us on our social media channels, which is, of course, something I forget to do here every show. This is something I'm terrible at. Got to make sure I'm going to put a little sticker up so I can remember to tell you guys all about that every show. I'm just horrible at that. I'm going to do that for you next. So stay on the grid with us. We got plenty to come in hour 2. Joe Pizza is going to join us. We got fantasy or reality, where we talk about milking cows. True story.
Great.
SportsGrid.com. Betting insights and entertainment at your fingertips 24/7 as our team covers the most important topics in sports wagering. Real-time odds, predictive betting models, expert picks, and more. Want the edge? Then get on the grid. SportsGrid.com.
Great.
Welcome back. As promised, for those of you looking for all of our information throughout the day, but you're saying to yourself, Craig, Davis, we love you guys, but 2 hours is too much time to watch you. I understand. It's hard for me to watch or listen to a 2-hour show too. So here's what you do. You go on Twitter and you follow us at SportsGrid on Twitter and at SportsGrid TV. And we post all of our clips, all of our opinions in 1, 2, 3-minute formats. You can see some of the best takes that we have here on the show, some of the worst takes that we have here on the show. In all likelihood, I'll retweet them. Davis will retweet them. But you can follow us too, of course, at Craig Mission, at Davis Maddock. Most importantly, though, go on Twitter. Follow us now at SportsGrid, at SportsGrid TV, whether it is the early line, the morning after, Fantasy Sports Today, Scott Farrell, all the shows. You can find your way over to our social media channels, and that is where you can get a little bit of an edge throughout the season. And I know, Davis, you're frequently on Twitter. I am too. I used to be a much bigger tweeter in my younger days, but I have more drafts and almost tweets than I actually have tweets now these days. Like, I think I'm going to say something and then I don't. I don't know what that says about me, but I've cut back quite a bit.
I think it says that you've grown up. I mean, I certainly I can certainly not claim to have done the same thing. I tweet more than anyone I know. It's no good. I'm literally always on there. I am always on Twitter, mixing it up, replying to people I shouldn't be replying to, talking about football, talking about fantasy. Like, it's my quality of life would be better if I'd log off more, and I can't click that log out button.
Yeah. I cut back quite a bit over the last, I would think, 4 or 5 years. There are different times that I'm on there, but it really hit me a couple of years ago when someone said that they had their notifications set to on when I tweet stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, do a lot of people have that, like, during baseball season? Does that mean that everything that I say, they're going to get a notification if I talk about my shoes? Oof. So I don't know. I cut back a little bit. Not cutting back on this show. Got another hour to go here. We got our headlines coming up with Chris at the top of the hour. We'll also hear from Caleb Smith, pitcher of the Diamondbacks, who is not too happy about being tossed yesterday, and that's putting it mildly. We'll be right back.